Call of Warhammer Beginning of the End Times is a mod for Medieval 2 that brings the Warhammer universe to Total War. It has an astounding amount of content, including a gorgeous and massive campaign map, basically spanning the entire Warhammer world from Ulthuan and Nagaroth in the northwest, to the dense jungles of Lustria far to the south, up through Norska to the bitterly cold Chaos Wastes, the barren deserts of Khemri, home of the Tomb Kings, the Southlands, and the long-lost dwarf hold of Karak Zorn, and the Mountains of Morn, and the Darklands, far to the east of the Old World. It's also been a staple of this channel for the last year, and I feel relatively comfortable in saying that I'm one of, if not the most experienced Call of Warhammer online players on the planet. Which, if you think about it, isn't super impressive, because the multiplayer community for this mod is, it's pretty tiny. But I have played a lot of multiplayer on this mod, and I have experience with every faction in the game, so I felt like I could drop some knowledge on the relatively sizable community here that watches my Call of Warhammer videos, and explain which of the playable factions are the best in a multiplayer setting. These are the top 5 factions in Call of Warhammer Beginning of the End Times. We're only like a minute into this video and I've already lied to you guys. There will actually be 6 factions included in this countdown because honestly, I can't separate them. All 6 of these races deserve to be in the top 5. So an honorable mention will go to the Chaos Dwarfs of Zar Nagrund, the dark-souled and slave-driving cousins of the Dawi we all know and love. The Chaos Dwarfs are characterized by an abundance of cost-effective, heavily armored infantry, one of the best artillery selections in the entire game, and lots of monsters to choose from like ogres and trolls. They also have access to Black Orcs, the elite and disciplined armored infantry for the Greenskins, because the Chaos Dwarfs were actually the race that created Black Orcs to be their slaves, before they all rebelled and escaped to the Blasted Wastes. Their roster combines overwhelming range firepower with incredibly resilient, close-quarters combat units, and they are a faction that happens to benefit dramatically from really weird unit pricing. The Infernal Guard variants are their core infantry and skirmish force, literally some of the tankiest and most powerful infantry units in the entire game, with 10 attack, 26 defense, and 2 HP, costing less but significantly outperforming similar units, like Ironbreakers for the Dwarfs. The Infernal Guard with Fireglaves are really the highlight of this faction. 10 attack, 20 defense, 2 HP, 16 missile damage, which is twice as high as Empire handgunners, and 4 more damage than Thunderers, and they are versatile. They can easily deal with many mid and elite tier infantry units one-on-one in melee combat. With their massive armor value and multiple HP, you can always put Infernal Guard on the front line and trade volley after volley with the enemy, almost always coming out dramatically ahead in the skirmish battle. This often forces enemy armies to rush you into the teeth of the waiting Axe and Shield Infernal Guard, and close-range firepower from Blunderbuss units that basically perform like shotguns and can obliterate charging enemy units. Once in melee, it's a meat grinder, and meat grinders are where the Chaos Dwarfs excel, cutting through what will be often 8 units of Infernal Guard, backed up by the very decent and cost-effective Chaos Dwarf infantry. It just becomes a nightmare for opposing armies. So much armor, so much HP, all while getting pounded into oblivion by Earthshaker cannons and blunderbuss fire. It's absolutely brutal. Now, it is easy to surround and outmaneuver a Chaos Dwarf player. They are very slow, they lack mobility, and they lack cavalry, but charging knights can be stopped dead in their tracks by an Infernal Guard or blunderbuss volley, and with a big selection of ogre and troll units to choose from, these tanky troops can also block charges and tie down enemy cavalry while the ranged units finish you off. For all of these reasons, I had to include the Chaos Dwarfs on this list, and they will get an honorable mention. Let's move on with the countdown. At number 5, we have Slaanesh, the Chaos God of butt stuff and bondage, She Who Thirsts, the Dark Prince, Hermaphrodite. Slaanesh goes by many names, but it's hard to dispute that his or her followers have a very unique sense of style, and in Call of Warhammer that is no exception. Decked out in pink, gold, and fluorescent Baroque armor, in my opinion they are the coolest looking Chaos faction in this mod, and they also happen to be the best. But why? Why is Slaanesh better than the other Chaos God factions? Nurgle, Khorne, and Tzeentch surely don't take kindly to such blasphemy. But the answer is very simple. Demonettes. Demonettes of Slaanesh mounted on steeds of Slaanesh are flat out the most ridiculous cavalry unit in a Medieval 2 mod where cavalry rules the battlefield. Impact damage, charge bonus, speed, maneuverability, all of these things are so important in Total War, especially in Call of Warhammer, and Demonettes on Slaanesh steeds have all of these in droves. They are the fastest cavalry unit in the game, slightly faster than Silver Helms or the High Elves, and when they run it literally looks like the game is in fast forward. They have 3 HP, making them the tankiest cavalry unit in the entire game, and they have insane melee stats. So what the Demonettes of Slaanesh do is perform as shock and melee cavalry all in one package, being able to quickly disengage, set up charges, and appear on the flanks of your opponent, delivering decisive strikes only to pull away and hit another important part of the enemy line before they can respond. They will slaughter skirmishers in seconds, they will wreck the most elite Empire Knights in prolonged melee, and they will beat Blood Dragon Knights 1v1 relatively easily as well. When a unit is beating Blood Knights in combat, you should be very, very afraid. Now with all of that said, they are also very expensive to field. At 6,000 gold crowns, you will not be able to field many of these units on traditional 30 to 40,000 gold crown games, but 2 of these units is usually more than enough. As an opponent fighting against Slaanesh, you have to focus on killing the Demonettes. There's really no other option, or your army is going to be in a world of hurt much faster than you anticipated. But Chaos in general is honestly just a strong faction, even without taking Demonettes of Slaanesh into account. They have good, tanky mainline infantry, they have a good selection of monsters to choose from Dragon Ogres to Chaos Giants, and they have Beastmen. Bestigors are a great investment for any Chaos army, 2 HP, good armor value, and a charge bonus that will make your opponent feel like they were just hit by a Mack truck. The Keeper of Secrets, the Greater Demon of Slaanesh, is a great investment if you don't expect your opponent to field mages or lots of artillery. They do cost 10,000 gold to field, so generally only really viable in the higher funds games, but can pretty easily get 400 to 500 kills if it doesn't get focused down by handgunners. But be warned, pretty much any mage type will demolish a Greater Demon in a volley or 2. It's one of their biggest counters, so you have to be very careful if you happen to see gold wizards or something of their ilk on the field opposite from you. Strong infantry, good monsters, and the best cavalry unit in the entire game. Slaanesh is number 5 on our list. And coming in at number 4, we have Bretonnia, the tiny roster made up of gouty and diseased peasants who pray to a wood elf goddess who doesn't really give a crap about them. Forza Lady. For real though, Bretonnia may have a small roster, but that roster is comprised of the most important unit you can field in Medieval 2 or Medieval 2 mods. Heavy cavalry. And boy do they have a nice selection to choose from. Grail Knights, 2 HP, massive charge bonus, and melee stats, can run headlong into Blood Knights and be expected to hold their own for a long time, if not outright win. Knights Errant, the most cost-effective heavy cavalry unit in Call of Warhammer, at only 1,900 gold crowns. You can field tons of these and watch as thundering hooves crush your opponent into the dirt. Knights of the Realm, you know them well, the bread and butter cavalry of Bretonnia, a war cry and a flash of heraldry, and suddenly you're impaled hilt deep on the end of a lance. Questing Knights with great weapons have a ton of infantry killing power as well, and basically against the Bretonnians you'll be seeing loads upon loads of cavalry, and cavalry spam just isn't very easy to deal with. But it's not just cavalry and cavalry spam you have to worry about, because the Bretonnians have the meanest, the nastiest, the most brutal siege weapon in the history of Call of Warhammer. And you think I'm exaggerating. Surely the Steam Tank, or the Hellstorm Rocket Battery, or Earthshaker Cannon, or Warp Lightning Cannon, or some other technological marvel or steampunk creation should be the most terrifying artillery piece in the Warhammer universe, right? No, you're wrong. The Trebuchet, a medieval counterweighted siege weapon that should be severely outdated at this point in the Warhammer universe, will make you cry way harder than any of those weapons. Unlike in Medieval 2, which only has 2 trebuchets per unit, the Call of Warhammer Bretonnia version has 4, and each unit fires twice as fast as the one from the base game. Turn on flaming projectiles and laugh with glee as the trebuchet munches through hordes of enemies from afar, cutting burning swaths of destruction through anything the ammunition encounters. Oh, you're a 3 HP demon that's existed within the warp for countless millennia and slaughtered thousands of the finest warriors in Warhammer? That's cute. You're dead. Oh, you're a Blood Dragon Knight that trained under Wallach Harkin and are the premier shock cavalry specimen in a world consumed by war? That's adorable. You're dead too, and so are 15 of your friends. The trebuchet is the honey badger of weapons. It does not care who you are or what you do for a living. It will find you, and it will kill you. and it might miss a bunch of shots along the way, but you have an army, and just because it missed the unit it was targeting doesn't mean it didn't just slaughter the 80 dudes that were directly behind you. And oh, it missed 3 seconds ago, you have time to close the gap and get into melee, right? False, it's already firing again. Can't really overstate it, the trebuchet is insane. Add some Pegasus Knights and their incredible maneuverability and charge power into the equation, along with men-at-arms halberds that hold the line very well, and peasant bowmen with good range and missile damage, and you have a faction that can be terrifying to deal with in a multiplayer scenario. For the Lady of the Lake, Bretonnia is number 4. Moving on to number 3, we've got the Empire, who have by far the largest roster of any faction in Call of Warhammer. They have access to Dogs of War mercenaries, they have access to Shadow Warriors and Dwarf Thunderers, and Ogres and Kislevite Cavalry, and all these special units, and that's before you even get to the meat and potatoes of their actual unit roster. The variety of troops you can field as the Empire in this mod is staggering, and that's one big reason why they have to be included on this list. When you have more unit choices than any other faction, there's a good chance you're going to be a good faction, and that's definitely true here. But let's ignore all the superfluous stuff on their roster for a second, and look at the Empire for what the Empire truly is. Faith, steel, and gunpowder. They have the biggest selection of heavy cavalry in the game, from the Knights Panther, the bodyguards of Boris Todbringer, Elector Count of Middenheim, to the Reichsguard, the bodyguards of Karl Franz, Elector Count of Altdorf, and Emperor of Humanity, to the Knights in Carmine, Knights of the Golden Lion, Knights of the White Wolf. The list goes on and on with these heavily armored knights that can just thrash entire infantry formations on the charge. And what that means is, you can field a lot of heavy cavalry and not hit the soft caps that dramatically increase unit prices when you bring more of the same unit. Knights of the White Wolf are really the highlight of the Empire cavalry roster. Clad in full plate, no helmets, just a wolf skin on their head, these are the chosen of the war god Ulrich, and with their massive two-handed warhammers will evaporate pretty much any infantry unit in the game with a single charge. 14 charge bonus on horseback, it's the highest of any cavalry unit in Call of Warhammer. And not only that, but they will go to work in prolonged melee for you as well. With that said, they are 1 HP, so if they go up against Demon Knights of Slaanesh or Blood Knights, they are in a lot of trouble. Demigryphs are the other cavalry highlight, 3 HP but low in number. This monstrous cavalry almost lives up to their huge reputation when compared to their brothers in Total War Warhammer. Surprisingly, not very expensive to field either, only 3,000 gold crowns. You get a lot of bang for your buck with the Demigryphs. But steel is not the only benefit of bringing the Empire to the field. Gunpowder is another super important component of the Empire's Holy Triumvirate. Handgunners are very cheap to field, they're great at putting the hurt on highly armored units, they're accurate, and they are damaging from long range. Outriders and Pistoliers, skirmish cavalry on the flanks have Parthian shot and are very fast, so they can deal truckloads of damage as they scoot across the battlefield, and the Empire has a big selection of unique artillery and war machines. Everyone knows the steam tank, the powerful cannon with huge armor and HP and damaging melee capabilities, but the Hellstorm rocket battery can also cut through swaths of enemy units from afar, and mortars are quite good at forcing an opponent to charge into a disadvantageous position. Nobody likes getting shot in the face by artillery. And of course, there are also the state troops and great swords. There's something truly spectacular here, but they will hold the line and they will kill enemies and allow your powerful cavalry to flank and deliver that final killing blow. Halberdiers are an essential part of the Empire roster, as they have very quick animations in Call of Warhammer that can stun lock higher tier opponents and hold out quite well in melee. But what about Faith? Faith in the winds of magic and control over the energy that spills from the realms of chaos. The Empire has all 8 lores of magic present, from Bright Wizards to Light Wizards, Jade Wizards, Amethyst Wizards, they're all there, and some of them are quite brutal. You've seen Gold Wizards rip through my Iron Guts from across the map in that Ogre Kingdoms replay. They're expensive to field, but they're great monster and demon killers. The mages of the Empire are second to none. Just like in Total War Warhammer and the lore, the Empire's strength is in their versatility. They do everything well, from skirmishers to infantry to artillery to the biggest selection of cavalry and mercenary units in the entire game. There's no way they can be left off this list, so here they are at number 3. And at the number 2 spot, we have the Undead of Sylvania, the Rulers of Night, the Vampire Counts of the Von Karstein bloodline. The Vampire Counts are a top-tier faction through and through, and a big reason for that are the special rules they share with their Total War Warhammer and tabletop counterparts. They cause fear or terror, and they are unbreakable. So why is it useful to cause fear in a Total War game? The answer should be relatively obvious. If you're causing morale penalties just by existing, you make routing enemy units easier, and once the enemy army routes, you can run them down with whatever you have that is fast enough to catch up. And if they're not fighting back, killing them becomes extremely easy. Being unbreakable is even more important for the Vampire Counts in this mod because there is no such thing as crumbling. Crumbling is a mechanic that is designed to balance out the fact that undead units cannot feel fear. As a unit or army begins losing rounds of combat, attrition sets in and models will start dropping, even if they aren't attacked. But there's no way to simulate this in Medieval 2 or its mods, so in Call of Warhammer there is no crumbling. But the undead can't rout from the field either, so what you're left with is an army of vampires and skeletons and zombies that will all fight to the last man. Those units of 250 zombies, you will have to kill every single one of them. Those crappy skeleton warriors, every single one will fight to the last bone. That gets very annoying to deal with. And what this equates to is an army that takes forever to cut through, that has some of the most terrifying units in the entire mod. Enter the unholy duo of epic vampire cavalry, the Knights of the Black Grail, those Bretonnian champions corrupted and twisted into the very beings they sought to destroy, and the Blood Dragon Knights, those legendary warriors who trained under Aberash's disciple Wallach Harkin, some of the most dangerous warriors in the history of Warhammer lore, and arguably the second best cavalry unit in the beginning of the end times. Both have 2 HP, both have insanely high armor values, both have shields, crazy charge bonuses, and will make your top tier Empire cavalry cry like few units can. There's really nothing on the battlefield save for greater demons and mages which these 2 cavalry units are truly afraid of. They are punishing units and have absolutely gorgeous models to top it off. They're amazing, so much fun to use. But wait, there's more. Drakenhof Guard, Grave Guard with halberds, dismounted Blood Knights with great weapons, all unbreakable, all cause fear, all can go toe-to-toe with or beat most infantry units in the mod. With the added bonus of never ever running away from a fight, they're just the ultimate tar pit faction, and playing against the undead can be super frustrating, because all these crappy units that only have like 15 dudes left in their infantry unit, who should have routed ages ago, are still in the thick of it, tying down important units who need to help you win other parts of the engagement. The undead don't care. And on top of that, the morale penalty from the Screaming Skull Catapult at least used to be redonkulous. Next level redonkulous. It was so crazy at one point that I had 5 units of Black Orcs who hadn't even seen combat yet. We were like a minute into the battle, they hadn't taken any casualties, and a Screaming Skull projectile went over their heads and wavered my entire battle line. Literally a single charge from skeleton warriors sent my whole army running for the hills. They did rally, but not before Blood Knights had ended a quarter of my units. Crazy stuff. So I usually just ban the Screaming Skull Catapult outright because it used to be utterly ridiculous, but it's just another reason the Vampire Counts are so strong. Unroutable, fear-causing, spooky scary skeletons, the Vampire Counts and Undead of Sylvania are number 2 on this list. And now, what you've all been waiting for, the number 1 faction in Call of Warhammer. Numero uno belongs to the Azur, the High Elves of Ulthuan. This is not fanboyism. I will admit I do love the High Elves, but this is as unbiased as I can possibly be. This is just from pure experience on Call of Warhammer, beginning of the end times. And I think if you've ever played with or against them in a match against a competent player, you'd probably agree with my assessment. The High Elves are absolutely insane in multiplayer, and it all starts with a relatively low-key unit, one that you wouldn't really expect to carry the torch for this race. A division of citizen levy from the port city of Lothern, created to defend Ulthuan at sea and on land. I am of course talking about the Lothern Sea Guard. They are so versatile, and so cost efficient, and so inexpensive it almost isn't fair. For 1700 gold, you get a unit that is tied for the longest archery range in the entire game, can easily drop 30 to 45 models off Chaos Warriors before they can even enter melee. It has access to Shield Wall, which can take the charge of elite infantry like greatswords and other great weapon units that can tank and survive in melee for an unobscene amount of time, all while the rest of the High Elf army shreds you with range fire. Let's take a second here to explain how most games go against High Elf players on Call of Warhammer. I'm playing as Chaos Undivided. I'm a very good faction. I have lots of armor, lots of monsters, I'm rushing, things are going great. I'm playing against the High Elves, who have 5 Lothern Sea Guard and 5 High Elf Archer units. The battle has started, the High Elves are in the back of their deployment, and their archers are already shooting. 10 archer units with fast reload and high missile damage are shooting me from halfway across the map. I run forward to close into melee, but by the time I get there, 1/3 of my army is already dead. And they have a shiny, bristling wall of Lothern Sea Guard who have already used up their ammunition, ready to take the charge in the face, while the rest of their archers still fire in safety from the back. Now normally you'd say, it's not an issue, I'll just win the cav fight and surround them. Just kidding. High Elves have some of the best 1 HP cavalry units of any faction in Call of Warhammer. Silver Helms are almost as fast as Demonettes of Slaanesh, and Dragon Princes of Calidor will batter Chaos Knights and most top tier cavalry. No big deal, I'll just overwhelm them in the infantry engagement. Just kidding. Sword Masters of Hoeth have uniquely fast spinning attack animations that let them shred through elite tier infantry like Chris Farley at a CC's Pizza buffet. And you're already missing a significant chunk of your army from arrow fire, which, by the way, didn't really take much effort. The High Elf player can literally just leave all their units on fire at will and pick and choose a couple important targets. Focus fire from 2 to 3 Elf Archers means that unit will be crying for their collective mamas after only a few volleys have landed. But the nightmare isn't over yet. There are still a couple of High Elf units that stand above the rest. In a faction full of your worst nightmares, 2 units stand ready to Freddy Krueger your dreams. The first are the Phoenix Guard. Elite halberd units in Call of Warhammer are really good. Like really, really good. For one thing, they're just versatile, and if you've seen a theme developed throughout this entire video, you probably understand by now that versatility is really important. The Empire and the High Elves are 2 of the most versatile factions, and they're both in the top 5. And the Phoenix Guard are versatile because they kill elite infantry and cavalry very easily, with shocking ease. Halberds do have a bonus versus large, so killing cav is kind of obvious, but why do halberds do so well versus infantry? Well, I kind of explained it earlier, but in Beginning of the End Times, they have short, quick, pokey animations that often prevent slower attacking units from finishing their attacks. Combine that with really good melee attack and wickedly strong melee defense, and you'll see why Phoenix Guard slaughter hundreds of good melee troops without much trouble, provided they don't get outflanked. I routinely see the Guardians of the Shrine of Azurian get more than 200 kills, and that really isn't very common for infantry units in this mod. The Black Guard of Nagaron for the Dark Elves perform much the same way. Amazing unit. But on top of all that ranged firepower from the Lothern Sea Guard and the High Elf Archers and the Shadow Warriors, the High Elf Mages also have crazy range and missile penetration. They can eviscerate an entire infantry block in a couple of seconds, and the High Elves also have a huge selection of infantry and anti-cavalry units to choose from. On top of all that, they have dragons. Dragons and Griffins, in my humble opinion, are the most overpowered units in Call of Warhammer for their price. For some reason, the pricing on these flying units is way off. They only cost 3,300 gold, which is less than some elite tier infantry that couldn't ever hope to make the same kind of impact on battles. The problem with dragons is that they have 6 hit points, and double the charge bonus of the best cavalry units in the mod, which in Medieval 2 means they have an incredibly punishing charge. But unlike cavalry units, dragons can disengage before getting hit at all, because they are so fast and their mass is so large, they can move through units like they aren't even there. What inevitably happens is you can cycle charge with dragons for an entire match and not really worry about what you're charging. It is easy to rack up 300 to 500 kills on a single Dragon Lord unit, and this is also true for the Dreadlords on Black Dragons for the Dark Elves faction. I've used them a lot. It's clear for their price they are utterly broken. And that's it. The High Elves of Ulthuan take the #1 spot through incredible versatility, overwhelming range firepower, and some of the best infantry and cavalry units in the game. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I had a lot of fun making it. Let me know what you guys think. Be sure to drop a like and a comment if you enjoyed it, and I will see you all in the next video.